All right, this afternoon we will be talking about the resources of Africa. So you need to get out your packets. And turn to the page that looks like this. So the questions we'll be answering today are: what are Africa's major natural resources? How are Africans developing these resources? When we look at a map of Africa's resources, we see that Africa actually has quite a few resources. Resources refer to anything that can be used by man. Natural resources are things that are found in nature that then can be used by human beings. So we often think of Africa as a poor continent. Remember, it's not a country, but a continent. The reality is they're really very rich in resources. When you look at this particular map, you can see this little like teardrop is oil. So you have some countries, especially Nigeria, has quite a bit of oil. You come along the coast, there's oil. The northern countries that we haven't talked about, they also have oil and they have gas deposits. Niger, one of the poorest countries in the world, has some oil. They don't have a lot. They also have uranium. You come down into southern Africa, central and southern Africa, the DRC, Zambia, Zimbabwe, you find gold. There are diamonds. So the question then becomes, for a continent that is so rich in resources, why do they have such problems with poverty? A lot of that has to do with political stability. So when countries are not politically stable, then they cannot develop these resources. Another reason why they struggle with poverty is because they lack the initial capital, the initial money to buy equipment and to develop these industries. All of those things complicate matters. All right, coming back to our presentation, agricultural resources. So much of Africa's land is used for subsistence farming or raising crops to support one's own family. This definition is really important, so make sure that you have it in your notes. Subsistence farming means that you eat what you grow. So subsistence farmers grow vegetables and they grow fruits, things that they can readily eat. If they have extras, then they will sell or trade those extras for the things that they need. My own experience is, especially in East African food, they need to buy oil, but they will raise all kinds of greens. They will raise onions and tomatoes, and usually some kind of cilantro. And when they have that, that's usually the basis for a lot of dishes. In particular, one greens dish that they eat that I made last year, and Anna would not try it, would be Sukuma Wiki, which means stretch the week. Stretch the week, if you don't have a lot of meat, you have to eat a lot of vegetables. And so they would take oil, they'll cook onions and tomatoes in the oil, they'll add the shredded greens and cook them together, maybe add some pepper, add some cilantro to create a dish. Crops that are raised to be sold are called cash crops. Cash crops include coffee, cacao, and tea. Coffee and tea particularly are grown in Ethiopia, in Kenya, in Tanzania, Uganda, in that highland area because it requires a lot of sunlight but cooler temperatures. And so the highlands in those countries are really good for coffee and tea. Cacao is the basis for chocolate, so that comes from Africa and South America. The problem then being when you use all of your land for cash crops, if those crops fail, which will happen from time to time, food shortages will occur because people won't have the money they need to then go buy food. Africa has rich hardwood tree resources, so lumber resources. They grow throughout Africa. Many have been cut down for sale. Some countries are replanting hardwoods in order to be able to save the forests. This is a particular concern in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where they are losing rainforest to the lumber industry and to farming. This is what we call a land use map. So this map shows you how land is used throughout Africa. And if you look at the area which we know is rainforest, if you look here, you see some subsistence farming. You see a little bit of cash crop farming. Cash crops take a lot of land, so subsistence farming plots are usually very small. And if you look throughout Africa, you see that most of Central Africa, where the land is halfway decent, is used for subsistence farming. You have these little pockets in the Sahara Desert that are used for cash crop farming. This would be where an oasis is. What you don't see a lot of is manufacturing and trade. Here's a little bit in South Africa, a little bit in Kenya. So what this tells you is that Sub-Saharan Africa, the countries of Sub-Saharan Africa are developing countries. Most of their people are engaged in agriculture. Very few of their people are engaged in manufacturing and trade. Herding is widespread in the north. Farming takes place throughout the western and central portions of the continent. Other activities such as manufacturing are scattered throughout Africa. One of the surprises that I had really when I had talked to my friend from Kenya is that they drive the same kind of cars we do, and what they do is they import used cars from the Arabian Peninsula. So the Arabian Peninsula, they have a lot of companies that buy used cars, they refurbish them, they ship them to Kenya, and then that's the cars that people drive because there are not manufacturing plants for vehicles in sub-Saharan Africa. For mineral resources, so an economy is a system for producing, distributing, consuming, and owning goods, services, and wealth. Economics essentially is how do you use your resources to meet your needs and wants. So mining is a major part of Africa's economy. If you go back to that map that I showed you at the beginning, items like gold, uranium, diamonds, all of those have to be mined from the ground. Parts of North Africa as well as the West African country of Nigeria have large supplies of valuable mineral resource petroleum. Nigeria actually has so much oil that they are part of OPEC, which stands for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. OPEC is a conglomeration of countries like Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Qatar, Iran, Iraq, all these countries that produce oil. And they make agreements amongst themselves on the supply of oil, which in turn then dictates the price. And because it dictates the price, then that affects our supply of gasoline. So petroleum is important because it's used to make oil and gasoline. The country of Ghana was once part of the Gold Coast because it was a chief exporter of gold. What you'll learn is that during the ancient kingdoms, Mansa Musa was the emperor of Mali, and when he traveled the world, as I told you last week, he spread so much gold that he actually affected the world price of gold. Other minerals from Africa include copper, silver, uranium, titanium, and diamonds. So balancing crops, minerals, and industry. A specialized economy is one that is dependent on one kind of industry. In Africa, specialized farm economies can be harmed by lack of rainfall or falling crop prices. So if you plant only one kind of crop, if you have conditions that are not right for that kind of crop, then you can suffer significant losses. This word is really important. African countries are now trying to diversify their economies, which means they're trying to add variety to them. African economies have diversified by producing a variety of crops, raw materials, and manufactured goods. If you think about here in Indiana, our farmers don't plant only corn. They'll plant corn and soybeans and maybe other things so that if something happens to the corn, then they still have soybean crops. So we try to diversify our economies or diversify our farm products so that we can't be too affected by one condition.